last time we integrated our React app and our Rails app together into one project. So now in my project, I have, well, I should commit all this. Sorry, meant to have committed that. So in my SDG app, I have my Rails application and my client application in one place. I'm now ready to start thinking about deploying my Rails application to production. Where am I going to put my Rails application for people to see? Here's the real thing. You do not have to deploy your capstone to production if you don't want to. If you don't care that anybody actually uses your capstone, you don't have to deploy it to production. Most people choose to because they want people who come see it to actually go use it and try it, but you don't have to. Some students during demo day will run their capstone projects locally and not even run it from production. But 90+% of students want people to come check out their app and click on it, right? It's going to be part of your portfolio. You want people to be able to visit it. So we will show you how to put your Rails applications in production. So the very first thing we need to do is to create an account at Heroku, Heroku, Heroku.com. So Heroku is a site for deploying applications to. It started out mostly just being a Rails application deployment. Now they support just about everything. It's the same places the .NET students, I believe, are going to send their .NET apps to. You can host JavaScript apps, Python apps, etc. What's up?
Just as a heads up, now you know your internet's not working.
Is that what's going on?
Yep.
Because you all are able to get to Heroku?
No, because your Slack message never did go through.
Okay. Look at that. Try again. Because I walked from the back to the front, and it didn't connect. There we go.
What's the difference between this and Netlify?
So Netlify only hosts static sites, so there's no logic running in the back end of that. So they're just hosting static HTML and CSS files, where Heroku will host a backend that's actively running code. It's actively accessing a database, where Netlify is just serving static assets. So you should get a screen like this. Go ahead and sign up for an account. I can't remember what the sign up looks like, because I signed up ages ago. But go through the sign up process, and that should be just about all you have to do there. Just get an account created. Let's see, are they still recommending brew install Heroku? Let's double check. Cool. So once you get your Heroku account created, you'll run this command to install the Heroku command line. So that's also in Slack. So like installing app or any of the other things we installed, we're going to install this with Homebrew. Sorry, we're going to install this with Homebrew. It's like app in that it's a tool for building and deploying applications. And the app is called Heroku. So once you have your Heroku account, then you can do this. Hey, I already have the latest version. Good. For you, this will likely install the Heroku command line. So let me know if you have a problem getting signed up to Heroku. You should just be able to sign up for free without any kind of credit card or any of that stuff. Cool. Let me know when you have the Heroku command installed.
Yeah, you said it's the primary development language is Heroku.
Yeah,
I mean,
so Heroku can deploy almost any kind of app. So if you write some Python apps, you can deploy them to Heroku. If you write .NET apps, you can deploy them to Heroku. If you write C# apps.
But it doesn't matter when you decide. I mean, because it asks you for the primary dev, but it doesn't matter. Okay, cool.
No. It's mostly asking you so it can provide you online help
What?
for the language of your
Specific?
primary one. Yeah.
Mm.
Do we need to do that now? or-
No. Did you get the Heroku command installed?
Oh,
Hmm.
Did you run brew tap Heroku brew and brew install Heroku?
no.
Then you need to do that. The two steps you need to do are create an account at Heroku.com, and the second one you need to do is brew tap blah 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 blah. Those two steps are the only ones you are likely to do this morning. The rest you're going to watch me deploy an application, because you probably don't have an application ready to deploy yet.
Says current brew not found.
Yeah, I got the same thing.
Oh yeah, you all are your yeah. So the Ubuntu folks are gonna do this. Yeah, sorry. This is your command. Let me know if that works.
So this cannot communicate with server post localhost.
Let's see.
Yeah, same here. For language, we just need to choose Ruby, right?
When you
Is that me?
yes.
Is it okay to download Bundler?
What's that?
Is it okay to download Bundler?
You don't have to download Bundler. We've already done that. You shouldn't be typing any commands other than the ones that I gave you. You don't need to do that. No.
Not this?
No. You don't need to do any of that. All you need to do is create an account. That's all you've got to do. So if you have an account, you're done. So no more commands. See if we can figure out for here what's going on. Such. Could you just having a bad day? Wait. You didn't have any issues with accessing. It's going, it's really slow.
I have a question too.
Go ahead and ask it.
The so I ran it and it's saying something about ZSH and autocomplete.
No.
I just ran the actual what you put in and then it ran
Okay,
this and I just wasn't sure if this was.
Oh, yeah, no, you're fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't want to run it, but
Yes.
I didn't know if that was something to do with the
Oh, yeah.
dash zone.
No, you should be fine.
Okay, cool.
It'll take into account, it gives you like a whole bunch of like help at the end of installing about all the million things you could possibly do,
Yeah.
but we don't have to worry about any of
Yeah,
those.
yeah, blind ears.
Well, we're waiting for, Mira, try this command. Okay, while that's going, I'll show you what it looks like to do the deployment. But if you have your Heroku account and the Heroku command installed, eventually, and unless you have a Rails application that's fully finished, which I don't think any of you do, this is what you would do to set it up. So this is like one of the last things, middle of next week you'll do when you have your app kind of working, you've got a couple of features deployed, you're ready to see if you can get it into production. We will use the Heroku command, and you don't have to follow along unless you have an app you want to deploy. You will run the command Heroku create and the name of the app. So I have a little bit of thing here, this little script that kind of gives you, right? And I put this in here because a lot of students forget. They try and type the name of their Heroku app with spaces or .com. What you're typing in here for the Heroku create is the name of the application that's going to be part of the domain name, and whatever your application name is going to be that.herokuapp.com. So all we need to do is type in the name of the app here, and you can't use spaces, and I normally recommend people just stick with lowercase, right? So like my-cool-app, or whatever the name is, your app is lowercase and dashed.
For that, so if say I bought a domain name this name and that should be this exact.
Nope, so that's later.
Okay.
This is the name of your app on Heroku.
Okay.
And later on, there's separate instructions for saying, I don't want to use Heroku's
the
domain.
DNS.
I want to use my own,
Okay.
right? So we have to tell Heroku, what are we calling our app? And that will give us, by default, whatever the app name we type in, .herokuapp.com. Later on, you can go into Heroku's web environment and say, cool story, I own foobar.com. That's what I want to call my application. But Heroku will always know your app is this. So, no phone, not right now. So let's put in, for this example, and this is just my example, I'm going to call it like SDG Cohort Manager. This name has to be unique across all Heroku apps. Right? So if you want to call yours, Fresh App, and somebody already has a Fresh App, you have to come up with a different name, right? Usually your names can be pretty unique, right? If Anastasia's is Sweet Tweets, right? Someone already has Sweet Tweets, you can be Sweet Tweets App, right? Sweet Tweets Plus, whatever.
Does the case say something?
It is, and I recommend you use lowercase, right? So the first time you do this, it's going to make you log into your Heroku account, so it knows who you are. And it created an app called SDG Cohort Manager. And in green here, whatever. Teal, right? This is where your app lives. This is the Git repository where your app lives. Because Heroku manages your apps with Git. So like we push our code to GitHub to keep a copy of it, we're gonna push our code to Heroku to deploy it. So now we're gonna use Git for two purposes. Once we've done the Heroku create, right? We've done Heroku create some name. The way that we deploy our app to Heroku is just with Git push, right? So you'll notice that now we're gonna use Git push, but now we say Heroku master. Because what Heroku Create has done is now we have two different remotes, right? Way back in the early days, we had to do like git push -u origin master, where origin was GitHub. Now we have origin is GitHub, and Heroku is our Heroku deployment. So now when we're done coding, there's two pushes we do. One push to GitHub, to turn in the code to keep it another copy, right? I'm going to share my code. I'm going to keep my code safe. The other push is for Heroku to get a copy of our code to deploy, right? So it's kind of like our yarn deploy from weeks 1 through 6, right? The equivalent of yarn deploy for a front end app for us is git push Heroku master. We're telling Git to push my code, whatever I've committed, to Heroku for hosting. So this means that when you change your code, it's not enough just to push it to Heroku. You have to git add, git commit, git push to Heroku. It also means you've got two different paces of deploying code. You can push to GitHub multiple times a day, right? You could push to GitHub every 20 minutes. I wrote a code, GitHub. I wrote some code, GitHub. I wrote some code, GitHub. You probably don't need or want to deploy to Heroku at the same pace you push your code to GitHub, right? It takes a while to deploy an app, so you probably don't want to be deploying 20 times a day at this point, right? Maybe you deploy 3 times a day, because look, right, it's taking a while to do this, right? So I don't want to wait around necessarily all the time to do this, right? So this is just like a regular git push, but what we see now is Heroku doing all this work setting up our app. Now that it's set up our app, if we want to see it, we can say Heroku, I think it's Heroku open. We can say Heroku open. This is like hub browse. So Heroku Open will open the site where our app is, and we can see that it is, right, SDG cohort manager.heroku app. SDG cohort manager.herokuapp.com. Bless you.
Thanks.
Right, so that's what Heroku Open will do. If you can't remember where it is, Heroku Open will open your app. But I'm getting an error. Because one of the things I have to do is set up my database. One of the very first things we did when we made our Rails application is we did Rails DB setup. And every time we make a migration, we run Rails DB migrate. We don't have to do the setup because Heroku gives us a Postgres database automatically, which is really nice. But what we do have to do, did I close that window? Really? Oh, here it is. Right. What we do have to do is migrate our database. But we're using a React app, so we have to do this extra step. So this extra step teaches Heroku that we're also using a React app versus Node.js. So after you've done that first push, we're going to teach Heroku that we're also running not only Ruby, but JavaScript code in our app. Then in order to push anything to Heroku, we have to have a commit. So if you push to Heroku and you want to push again, you have to have a commit. So I'm going to add an empty commit just to say, hey, we're adding JavaScript to Heroku, and then we'll push to Heroku again. This is a one-time setup to teach Heroku that it also now has all of the node, right? All of the npm install, all of that stuff as well. So we only have to do this step once at the very beginning. Because now we're teaching Heroku about all the things that we set up the other day when we ran that JSON tool and we taught it about package JSON and having to build our client application. This is why the name of the client is so important, is because Heroku is now going into our client folder and running npm install, right? Kind of like yarn install, but we're using npm. And then it's running build, it's building our client app on the Heroku side. And this is why I say like it takes a while, so you probably don't want to deploy every code change, right? If you're like, oh, I fixed the header, cool, push it to GitHub. You don't have to push it to Heroku. I find most students probably about halfway through Capstone will deploy and check that, hey, my deployment works, I can see my app, and then maybe they deploy like at the end of every day and just check, yep, that new feature works here and it works on Heroku. When you get close to code freeze, you probably want to be deploying more often. So you're not waiting until like Tuesday morning and we want to see your app in production. Oops, I've got a whole bunch of deployment issues. Don't let those wait until Tuesday. Unless you're not going to deploy it, right? If you're not deploying at all, cool. But also recognize that means no one will be able to try your app.
I think it's all.
Did it finish or did it stall?
Cool.
Okay, we can't use this playlist. I will have to research how to install Heroku for this environment. I will find out and then let both of you know. I'll have to look up how we installed it for the folks last time, because unfortunately it's not in my notes in handbook, but I will add it there. Waiting. Right. The backend apps take longer to build than our front end apps.
So while we're waiting, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily relevant to this project. if the app only has front end and it doesn't have a back end, do I still have to do the step you mentioned before about something about a database?
If your app only has a front end, you can deploy it to many other places besides Heroku.
Okay.
You can deploy it to Surge, Netlify, GitHub pages, because it's only a pile of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Don't use Heroku.
Heroku is probably overkill
Okay.
for just a front end JavaScript, HTML, CSS only app. Netlify or Surge or GitHub pages is a much easier deployment setup. Right? Heroku's claim to fame is it lets us deploy any kind of app, including backend apps. It's actually unoptimized for front-end only apps. It's optimized for apps where there's a server running and it's interacting with a database or it's interacting with files on a system, etc. If your app has a database, then you're probably working from Heroku. But if it's a front-end app that's only using an API and you don't have a backend,
Yeah.
then any of those other things are fine.
Okay, that answers that question. But there's React.
That's still just a pile of JavaScript.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was like,
If your
questioning
app,
myself.
if your app could be completely developed with app,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have a backend,
Gotcha. Okay.
right? Because that's just front end. If you're doing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and React, or Backbone, or Angular, or Ember, those are all still JavaScript front end tools. As soon as you have something where you have to start a server, not like our Yarn start. But
Yeah,
you
that's
have
why I
a-
got confused for a
you have a
second. I was like,
backend?
wait.
We only have Yarn start for like the browser sync ability and the Webpack ability.
Okay.
Once you need a server running that's managing data, then you need something more than Netlify.
Okay.
Cool.
Oh, Max
Hey.
is free, isn't
Yeah.
it?
No, I don't think so. No, because there was one more command that I had one run, and it's actually not going to work. So you were just doing the preparatory step, which we need to do anyway. And I had him try the full command, and it doesn't work. So I have to find a different set of instructions for you. I will find them and I will put them in Slack. Because those instructions don't work anymore, unfortunately. So now we've done this step. We've taught Heroku how to learn that we have a built-in React application. The last thing we need to do is run db migrate, but you'll notice that we're not just running a normal Rails db migrate. Right? This is how we would run after we generated a scaffold or a model. We would run Rails db migrate. All the commands that we would run, Rails db migrate, etc., we can run here locally this way. Or if we prefix it with Heroku run, now we're telling that command to also run on our deployed server. So every time you deploy new code that has a migration contained in it, you have to run Heroku run Rails db migrate. So you'll be in this phase of write some code, push to GitHub, push to Heroku. If that push to Heroku includes a migration, you added a column, you added a new model, you added a belongs to, something where you change the schema, you have to run Heroku db migrate. And you can kind of see, sprinkled in with some more debugging, you can see what we used to see with our migrations, right? This is the old text we used to see when we had migrations, and then here's just some extra debugging that Heroku gives us. Now that we've migrated, we should be able to open our app and see our app. Where's our front end? Hooray, broken. Oh no, I have a syntax error somewhere in my code. Did I have a syntax error here before I started? I should have checked before I deployed. So what we should see what we should see is our front end. So let's see if we have an error locally. No? Oh wait, maybe we do. No, the login is here. Login with Google. Let's log back in. There's our, that's working locally. Let's see what happens if we do, let's log in here. Nope, we didn't get anything. What we should get now in our main app is we should get the login working, but something in our JavaScript isn't compiled correctly. And this is one of the worst things to debug, when your compiled JavaScript isn't working. Because this is the JavaScript after all of the build process runs. So the way we debug this is we run an npm, from the main directory, run an npm build. Nope. What do we run? Oh, we go into CD client and we run it from here. We run npm run build from inside the client folder. So this is running locally the same thing that the server would run, right? It's creating an optimized production build. So it's going through all of our JavaScript and our CSS and packing it together and compressing it and all the things you want for production. And then after it's built into here, it ends up in a build folder, right? This is actually what gets sent to production, right? You'll notice that we have not any of the code that we have, right? We have in the build folder, this is what gets sent to Heroku when we build it. We end up with static files. This is all of our JavaScript all stuck together, right? We don't have our individual app.js and our cohort.js. It takes all of that and bundles it into like one big JavaScript file because it's more efficient for production. And if we have to debug this, unfortunately what we have to do is something like this. So let's see if we get, let's see if we can debug why this is. Huh. It's built it. So this is where we would sit and debug this. And I don't know if I want to sit and debug this for the time in front of you. Because this is normally this last step and we're building, but something in building our JavaScript is not working nicely. Because when we run this here, we are getting a compiled JavaScript error. Right? It's saying there's an unexpected token less than. And unfortunately, it's somewhere in this giant pile of, oh wait, this shouldn't be JavaScript. This is coming back HTML. You need JavaScript to run this app. This is coming back as, yeah, that's why, because this not JavaScript, right? This is a JavaScript file, but we're getting HTML back.
Isn't that like on the index page?
This is my index page, but I wonder. What could be wrong is this. Let's take a look. Nope. What could be wrong is this. Client. I think it is. I think it's this home page right here. Let's see if we delete this. I don't think that's supposed to be in there. So I wonder if we take that out. That home page setting is meant to tell the client where to fetch assets from. Where should I get my JavaScript? Where should I get my CSS? Where should I get my images? And something set that to the phrase nowhere. And I don't think that's supposed to be in there. So let's change that and redeploy it. I think that's what's going on. See, this is why, like, getting this stuff deployed to production, we want to kind of go through the process once and get it working, and then not deploy it all the time because it takes. We kind of sit here and watch the paint dry.
But like normally, like you'd have like a tab open for deploy and doing something else, right?
I don't like to be changing code in the middle of a deploy
Gotcha.
because then what I deployed and what I have locally isn't the same anymore.
Yeah.
So normally, like, I'll take a little bit of time to go do something else, like start the deploy, go get a cup of coffee, go read an article, do something else. Oftentimes on a team, this deploy happens automatically in the background for you. You push and then a CI server, bless you, will be doing this build for you. So you don't have to wait for your computer to be done doing it. So normally in the team setting, somebody has set up automatic deployment. So you push to GitHub and then Heroku wakes up and automatically has your app deployed. So you don't have to sit here and watch it. And in that case, I am okay going off and doing something else because then at least I know the code is committed and it's on GitHub and I can go back to that version without having to worry about it. In your all's cases, you'll probably deploy once a day. Let's see if this fixes it. Heroku open. There we go. Yay. Cool. I tried logging in, it tells me something went wrong. This is because now we also have to configure auth0 with another callback. Remember the other day when we did auth0, we had to do HTTP localhost 3001 callback? Now my app is in production. I have to also tell it that this URL is also one of the allowed. So it's going to take me to my settings page. And now I also have to say, in addition to this, I can also deploy here. Do I put a comma? Comma separating them. All right, so now I can use localhost and I can use production. I couldn't set this up before because I didn't know what my Heroku app name was yet. So now that I've done this and I save it, I should now be able to come back to my app, come all the way back to my app here, reload my app and log in. here's my app. Right? Notice that the data here is different because the data that I have in my local development database, I do not have in production. Right? My production database is one database and my local database is another. Tomorrow we'll talk about, or maybe Thursday, we'll talk about if you have sample data you want to put into your app, like you want to pre-populate it with a whole bunch of jobs and companies, or you want to pre-upload some yoga classes or patterns or whatever it is. I'll show you how to write some code where we can pre-generate some data both locally and for production, so that you don't have to like create a cohort in both places. So we should be able to create a cohort here, right? Or create a job in both places. There we go. Cohort 13 and add a student. I'll research why that file has the home page nowhere in it, see what added that, and update the instructions to get rid of it. But this is all you should have to do to host, deploy your app. My recommendation on your to-do list, probably early to mid next week, like Tuesday, Wednesday next week, make a goal to have your app have at least some functionality totally complete, and then we'll deploy. And then from that point, you'll just deploy daily, just to make sure that when the Tuesday following rolls around, you're still good for deployment. I will research for Windows systems for Linux how to get your Heroku command line. So don't necessarily worry about it today. Add it to your to-do list to have your first deployment. I would probably say, if you're trucking and you've got your app combined, your React app and your Rails app are together, and you have it like one API done, and you can locally create, read, update, and delete a thing, yeah, let's deploy to Heroku. But it doesn't make sense to deploy to Heroku until you can completely Rails backend, React front end, combine those two with a create, read, update, and delete, then deploy. And again, if you want me to sit with you when you do your first deploy, totally happy to. But I will update the instructions for Windows, and I'll figure out where that home page came from. Because other than that, we were just following these instructions. There's some other things about Heroku deployment. Right? Normally when we're running our Rails server, we see the server here, right? And we can see all of the errors and we can see the queries that run. But when you're running in Heroku, right? I'm not running anything locally, but my app is running here, right? I don't see any of the logs. You can run the command Heroku logs. This will show you all the logs of what your server is doing up in Heroku. So here's that same thing. Here are the logs here. You can kind of see way over here, all this stuff on the left is particular things about Heroku, about which app are you running, timestamp is it debug. Over here is what we are familiar with some extra stuff. This is our Rails application. If you want to see the logs as they flow, you can add -t to the end for tail. Now the logs are running, right? But I don't get my prompt back. And as I make requests in my application, I see the logs show up here. So Heroku logs and Heroku logs -t are good when your application is not working as you expect in production, and you want to see what queries did it run? Did it go to the right? So long. Right? Did it go to the right controller and action? Did it go to cohorts show? Because this is the URL that I accessed. Heroku logs and Heroku logs -t are your helper. Right? It's like running Rails server locally and seeing that Rails log. The git push Heroku master and Heroku logs and Heroku run db migrate, that's like 99% what you need to start digging into so that your capstone will be deployed and in production. That and setting up Auth0. If you have images, when we talk about images, I'll show you how to configure images uploading locally and for Heroku, because it's slightly different. But it's only like 1 or 2 extra steps for production that we have to do.
I have 2 questions.
Mhm.
One is, what's it? Oh, crap. Well, I was just wondering about creating like OAuth before actually. Is there anything with Heroku that we need to do with OAuth, or everything's kind of on our?
It's already taken care of. The very first time you try and log in, you're going to get an error that says, I don't understand this URL. You'll take the URL that it gives you and you'll paste it into your Auth0 configuration.
Okay, yeah.
And that should be it.
Cool. My next question, so a goal of mine for my project is to get my images up by this week.
Mhm.
By this weekend, definitely. But I don't. So I've had to pivot a little bit. I'm still using like dummy images. So I wonder if, I think about it, it doesn't really make sense to kind of try to get those persisted. If they're dummy images, try to persist them. So
Right.
All right. So yeah, front end first, and then once I
Yeah,
get the assets.
we'll probably talk about, because we still have it on our list of things that we were going to talk about. Where's our list? Right, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. I'll probably wait until next week to talk about this, although I think a few of you probably want to have your own domains. We've got sample data and image uploading. We'll probably do those both tomorrow or Thursday, and then we'll do maps one of the other days. And so maybe we'll do maps tomorrow and image uploading and sample data on Thursday, or vice versa. So that'll be the plan. And then Fridays and next week will be whatever you all need, right? I think this is the main list of things to go over. Then everything else will just be ad hoc, and we'll have a lecture one day or we won't have a lecture one day, depending on what folks need. I'm happy to add more things on here. Some things that we haven't talked about are how to properly delete models that have a has-many relationships. So there's a mini lecture there. And then one thing I don't think we've ever really talked about with APIs and React is how to handle errors. What happens if you go to create a cohort and a validation fails? Right? Or you go to delete something and that fails? How do we handle failures in our front end? So that might be something we talk about next week. Right? So your apps are a little more graceful when something unexpected happens. So there's extra stuff like that we can talk about.
Yeah, I was thinking too, it would be, so if we wanted to say use like Bootstrap and Font Awesome, I'm really only, like I haven't done it locally, so I've only been doing the CDN, and like, if we could look at that, I mean, that is just like downloading it.
It's
right?
also
Like,
okay just to use Heroku from a CDN.
Oh,
Totally
okay.
fine.
Okay, cool.
If you're comfortable just adding Heroku HTML and CSS from a CDN,
Oh, I mean,
you don't have to install it locally.
right, and I mean for others, like, I mean for specifically Bootstrap or Font Awesome, we have these assets that are dependent on this website that could, I've seen that could just fail and they could cause like bugs. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do just use Bootstrap from the CDN.
Uh-huh.
There's another positive reason for that is
Just
if a
try to
user's
explore.
already been to that, let's say somebody goes to my site and my site uses Bootstrap CDN, they've already loaded all of that CSS and JavaScript. They come to your site, they don't have to fetch it again because they've already fetched it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
some people prefer to use the CDN because it's faster.
Yeah, I mean that is the one thing that I like about
Yeah.
it, because before, I mean,
Yeah.
it was just so large.
Yeah. If you want to use Bootstrap locally, I can show you how to yarn add the Bootstrap locally, and because then it integrates into your app and then you have to import it a different way. I'm 6 of one, half dozen another if you're using Bootstrap for your project, whether you want to just throw the link in your HTML file and use it from the CDN, or if you want to go through the process of adding it as a resource.
Yeah, I mean, which is
The only reason why I would say you would download Bootstrap as a package and use it locally is if you're going to use the React components on top of Bootstrap. Right, so Bootstrap has its own thing, but there's also React components. Right, so there's this project called React Strap that gives you React components for all these things. So if you want a tables are bad, a list group, right? You actually get a React component that is a list group. So you don't have to do all of the HTML parts. You can just make a list group and a list group item. This is harder, but easier, right? It's another set of learning curve on how to use React Strap. But once you learn it, then coding in React plus Bootstrap is easier. But you've got to go through the learning process of you're learning another component library. So I've done apps with React and Bootstrap with React Strap, and I've done them without. Just depends on which you prefer. I think if your app is going all Bootstrap all the time, this can be really helpful. If you're doing a React and Bootstrap app with heavy customization, this can actually be worse. Because you've got to now throw all your classes on top of all of these things. So, kind of up to you. Kind of up to you. Cool. So I will go back and update this once I figure out what the Windows instructions are for you all. And I will figure out where that homepage nowhere thing came in and make sure this is updated. And just set yourself a target early, mid next week to have at least something deployed if you're going to deploy. Right, for instance, down here I talk about sample data, and then in the setup for image uploading, I also talk about Heroku. So it's good that we do this today so that the rest of the lectures this week, we can talk about the deployment aspects. And that's it.
Cool.